In one of my recent videos, someone commented on how I kind of sound like Nile Red, but I'm not convinced, so this time around, I'll be imitating his inflections for the whole video. This is a bit of a follow-up to my previous video on the tips to grinding. I've been really surprised with all the positive feedback, so thank you everyone for the kind words and support. There were a few things that perhaps I didn't address a bit too well though. Yes, I am aware that the best way to grind to top tier is to have a source of income outside of the game to purchase premium time and vehicles, which I thought I made pretty clear by letting you guys know that I am indeed in need of immediate mental assistance. Also, the whole get premium time in vehicles has been covered to death by other content creators, and I wanted to make something unique and actually interesting and helpful beyond the 10th How I Got to Top Tier in 24 Hours video, where it shows some mediocre gameplay of someone base bombing in some under-tiered premium. Now, with that out of the way, I wanted to discuss a topic on similar lines. Now that you have top tier, how do you actually enjoy it? This isn't a trivial question, since top tier is notorious for its steep learning curve, battle rating compression, power creep, and very large skill difference between players, where it is extremely easy to die with any small misstep. Plus, even if you are good at top tier, it can get pretty monotonous with the whole ground hugging, furballing, and dying because you couldn't pay attention to 10 different people at once. So this won't be a how to get good at top tier video explaining the skills required to game the meta, as there are plenty of other people who have done videos on improving skill-wise in top tier. This will be more of a discussion on what else you can do at top tier to find some enjoyment out of what essentially is arcade mode with extra steps. So, let's jump right in. I won't be covering this point in too much depth, but I did want to mention that the reason you might not enjoy top tier is because you might just be new to this matchmaker, and haven't learned the meta around this gameplay. This matchmaker's pacing is vastly different from any other battle rating. With pulse Doppler radars, IRCCM missiles, it can get pretty challenging to learn to play. Some general tips to get started are to take off and flank around the left side of your starting direction and stick with your team, to fly low to the ground to dodge radar missiles, to flare with your afterburners off to dodge most IR missiles, keep your speed high and watch your 6, and have easy keybinds for managing your weapons. The top tier jet that you're flying might also not be the most competitive at top tier. Most nations will have at least one competitive top tier aircraft, so if you're having trouble with the one you're in, you can usually find a better one. That's about as much as I'll cover here, since other content creators like Defin, JetNoob, Seekerhead, and Jake have covered this in much greater depth and volume. So maybe you're decent at playing the meta, but what if you want a bit of change of pace? Most games are furballs on the deck, and even if you switch your jet, that can get pretty boring very quickly. One way you can switch things up is by trying high-altitude BVR missile jousting. The best planes to try this in are the F-14s, the MiG-29s, and the Yak-141. The F-14s can play a role of conventional BVR missile jousting, with its large AIM-7 loadouts, or you can be goofy and bring the Phoenixes out for some fire-and-forget gameplay. Some tips for firing the Phoenixes are: stay below 5.5 kilometers in altitude to avoid producing a contrail, fire the missile ideally above Mach 1 for best range on enemies within 40 kilometers, fire the missiles in TWS mode to not alert the enemy of your launches, cycle through the targets you get on the TWS mode to find enemies who look low and farther behind, which are usually the base bombers who will be less willing to dodge your missiles. Fire on targets that might be going over bumpy terrain, so there's a chance that they go over a dip and the missile is able to track them precisely. And dive to the deck as soon as you're done firing your Phoenixes, unless you have Sparrows and you intend to do some more conventional jousting afterwards. Another solid option for BVR is any MiG-29 or the Yak-141, which have access to the R-27ER, which has inertial guidance. This allows you to lose and then reacquire lock while the missile still flies, and give the enemy less time to react and dodge the missile. Some tips for using the R-27ERs, especially on the MiG-29s. Climb as high as you can, ideally above 8 kilometers, and stay above where your team is on the deck, so that it's harder for the enemies below you to lock and fire upon you. Acquire high-altitude targets with TWS, lock them and then fire the missile under 40 kilometers, and then immediately unlock so that you don't set off their RWR. and then track them in TWS mode and then guess when the missile is close, and then reacquire the lock so that you can guide the missile in for its final approach. These are just what worked for me, but feel free to experiment and find what works for you. You don't have to use these planes, and you can make BVR work with most planes with decent range radar missiles, but usually they are limited in the number of missiles, the stealthiness of the launch, or the flight performance compared to the F-14 and the MiG-29s. Playing high-altitude BVR does make you very vulnerable to other radar missiles, and results won't be consistent, but it's still a different tactic that can be pretty fun to learn. When you get a launch warning on your RWR, you do need to make the decision between holding your lock to continue guiding your missile in, or dodging, which can be frustrating at times. When you do end up dodging, you can either dive down to the deck to use ground clutter, or you can fly perpendicular to the direction that the radar lock is coming from to notch the radar. Just make sure to bring some chaff so that if they switch from pulse Doppler to regular search mode, that you can still dodge the missile. Okay, I know what you're thinking. That's a horrible way to have fun, and will just make me more likely to die. But that's actually kind of the point. If you play primarily as a fighter and play along with the meta, you sometimes find yourself a bit too conservative in your positioning, and it can also be frustrating while you die with no kills. Playing as a fighter-bomber with a payload can help you play more aggressively since you have to insert yourself into the middle as quickly as possible to drop your payload. There's also less blame on yourself if you die since your flight performance was limited by your payload you were carrying, so it's understandable that you died. Plus, it gives you alternative objectives to work towards that's much more achievable and can help grind and spade more consistently if you have trouble getting kills. It's actually pretty funny that in certain planes, I find myself doing a lot better if I actually bring a payload, and I get a lot more kills if I drop my bombs first, because I find myself in a better position straight in the middle of the dogfight, as opposed to playing more conservatively on the outside. I'm definitely not telling you that this is the go-to way that you should play certain vehicles, but I'm saying that if you're getting bored of playing top tier the same way, this could switch things up a little bit. I'm not sure how many people are aware of this game mode, but Air Assault is a fun way to relax by taking down massive formations of enemy AI bombers before they can bomb your base. The grind potential isn't great, and it takes quite a bit of time to complete, usually like around 20 minutes, but it's a very nice change of pace, and you do get a booster if you complete it. It's especially fun if you get to bring out something like an F-14 with active homing Phoenixes and just spam them out like it's Ace Combat. Plus, you can do pretty well even if you're stock. Some tips for people who might not have played it before are bring as much fuel as you can, as you will burn through it pretty quickly and the game will last pretty long. Have a keybind for jettisoning weapons or reloading weapons so that you can rearm for a full missile load while you travel from formation to formation. And prioritize and kill the ground targets as quickly as possible, as they will very quickly sap your base's health. Here the stakes are low and you just get to fire off a bunch of missiles and pretend like you're playing Ace Combat. One of the biggest things that upsets me about top tier is that very rarely do you get any interesting dogfights due to the nature of the weapons and the teams. At least at 10.3 you can sometimes get some close-end dogfights and clutch games, but at top tier every game is a sweep one way or another, so your flight performance at low speeds can mean very little sometimes. The great flight performance of these top tier jets is what I'm personally more interested in over their missiles and their weapon systems. One way you can actually experience utilizing your flight performance is by playing in custom battles, just by flying around with other people and goofing around with funny maneuvers. While there are ones where you can kill each other and fire weapons, I personally enjoy the pilotage servers, which have weapons disabled, so that everyone is there just for fun, to fly around in formation and to show off some goofy maneuvers. The people are friendly and inviting, and everyone is just there to have a good time. If you don't like that one, look around and find one that fits what you want to do and see what you like. Let me know if you find any other interesting servers that I can join in. So, if you've tried top tier and you don't like it, that's perfectly fine. Top tier is very different from all the other game modes, and so even if you like the rest of War Thunder, you might not actually like top tier. I personally enjoy prop meta much more, since it's slower and more methodical in gameplay. If people say that you don't like top tier because you have a skill issue, that might be true, but it's not worth banging your head against a wall when you could just go around it and find something better to do. Well, for now, that's everything I have to say for this video, so I hope you learned something new in it. Let me know if there's something fun that you like to do at top tier so that I can continue justifying the stupid amounts of time that I've spent getting there in multiple nations. I'm sure there's something I've missed. Oh, and make sure to smash the